Hello Skillets, and welcome to a brand new episode of Cast Iron, the show all about rock and metal. And today we're going to push Lewis and my friendship to breaking point because we're covering an album that's been on the backlog for a while. Today we're covering Dream Theater's Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. So Lewis, how are you?
Very well, buddy. Had a lovely week away last week. Caught up with some friends, and yeah, managed to get some time on the coach up to listen to some metal and some recent discoveries. So that was really good fun. So yeah, it's been nice.
So what's on the recent discoveries?
I think I showed you in a little chat, but I discovered a copy of The Way of All Flesh by Gojira in a charity shop, and it's been on constant rotation recently. Really, really enjoying that. So that was a nice little thing, and I agree in what you were saying last time. In that, like, if we would have covered that, then we would have just been like, this is great, this is great, this is great, this is great. Whereas, at least from Master Sirius, it was kind of nice to get the sort of like preamble to where that sound sort of came from and how it was evolving at the time, sort of thing. So yeah, that was really nice. And the other thing is, I've been listening to the Hives quite a lot recently. I got Tyrannosaurus Hives from a charity shop as well, and very much enjoyed that. That's the album with See Through Head on it, which is an absolute banger.
Is that got Hate to Say I Told You So?
No, that's Veni Vidi Vicious, I think. That's that album. Okay. But yeah, they're going to be supporting The Offspring in November, so I'm going to be seeing them live. And apparently the Hives are fantastic live, so I'm very much excited to finally properly see them. So just exploring more of their back catalogue as well, because they're a band I've always kind of liked, but never really properly delved into. So it was nice to find one of their records.
Yeah, like I must admit I've only listened to about 2 Hives tracks, one of which is probably Hate to Say I Told You So, but it was perfectly listenable. We saw The Offspring live a couple of years ago now, the pre-plague times, and there's something really interesting about guys in their 50s singing all these songs about 20-year-old life. And it's weird when Bad Religion do it as well.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a tongue-in-cheekness to it. The Offspring, didn't they recently fire their drummer because he refuses to get a COVID vaccine?
Yes, he did. Yeah. And they actually, so they normally record with a different drummer when they make records. They record with a guy called Josh Freese, who is like almost drum like session musician to the stars. Essentially, he's on everything. But yeah, like they had to play a show last minute, and Pete Parada was like, unavailable because he was anti-vax. I don't know if he's anti-vax. I think there was, from what I can gather, I think it's he's got some sort of medical condition that means he can't get vaccinated at the moment, which meant they just sort of like gave him the boot. But yeah, they just flew in Josh Freese, because if I remember correctly, I think Dexter Holland is an actual licensed pilot. So he went and picked him up and flew him across, Holland and then played a show and flew him back the next day. So yeah.
Doesn't Dexter Holland also have like a PhD and Doesn't he actually have like a working knowledge of vaccines?
I think so, yeah. Which is probably why he was a bit like, right, well, this is serious, sort it out.
Hey, well, look, you've been vaccinated. I'm in Australia, so my first one's booked in for mid-September. But if you can't get it, if you can't get it for medical reasons, that's fair enough, and that's why it's so important for everyone else to get it. I'm not going to do a get vaccinated thing, but
But yeah, if you're a touring musician, they're just not going to let you play, are they? So you're not going to let you in the country without any vaccinations. So, yeah.
It's fair enough, I guess.
Yeah.
So I had an interesting day where loads of new music has all just come out in the past week or two.
Yeah, I know. You've just sent me a new Velocore track, which I had a little listen to this morning.
Oh my god! So I had one of those days in work where I had a lot of deep work to do. I was editing I think it was about 4,500 words of speaking notes for this big for a big corporate plan launch event we're doing next week. So for me, it was, headphones on, let's get metallic. And so the new Bellacore track came out. It's called Hidden Window.
Yep.
It is. It's a Bellacore song.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal.
It's fantastic.
The new Leprous album dropped today.
Oh, cool.
And today being the 27th of August, it's called Aphelion, which is like it's the same sort of thing as Apogee. So it's like the furthest point away that a planet is from the sun in its orbit. It's
not the game software house, not Apogee software.
No. That Aphelion, not Apogee software. The Duke Nukem publishers. No. The new I wasn't a big fan of Pitfalls, their previous one, but I pretty much love everything else Leprous have ever done.
Yeah.
And I've listened to Aphelion once, and it kind of blew my mind. I think it's a real return to form.
Oh, lovely.
They're certainly not a metal band anymore, but I think what they're doing with prog rock is really interesting and unique. Yeah. And so I was very impressed by the first listen of that.
Oh, good.
The Tesseract Live album Portals also came out today.
It did, yes. I didn't get a chance to catch that. Yeah.
Okay, so I've listened to it once as well, and it's interesting because it's kind of live, kind of not, because it was a live gig they did that I think we probably would have watched if we'd known it was on, actually.
Yeah.
So there's no audience interaction, and it's played quite straight.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. I like hearing Dan's take on some of the Ash tracks because we've talked before, and I really like Altered State. So it's interesting to hear Dan covering those vocals. He does a superb job.
Yep.
Although I did find the production there's something a bit weird with the drums. They're a little bit it's a bit clicky and irritating. But that was But apart from that, it was fine. It does feel a little bit superfluous because it's played quite straight and they're not doing anything new with the songs, but it's really enjoyable as an introduction to the band, especially. The other album that dropped in the past couple of weeks is the one I'd sort of previously flagged as being an album of the year contender for me, which was Act of Denial with Negative.
Okay.
And Act of Denial is Steve DiGiorgio from Testament and Death fame,
of course,
Krim from Septic Flesh, Bjorn Strid on the vocals, and it's just as good as all the singles. It is indeed an album of the year contender. It's amazing. It's essentially like if you like soil work, you're gonna soil your pants. Listen to this. It's very much in the vein of soil work, scar symmetry. So it's got slightly more synthy bits.
Yep.
But it's played quite straight Gothenburg style melodic death metal. So no surprises that I absolutely loved it. I've pretty much had that on loop.
Good stuff.
But I've just had so much new music drop on the first day.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
I'm really looking forward to the new Bellacore album later in the year because they're not just Australia's finest band, but I think for my money they're probably the most exciting metal band out there.
Yeah.
And they're not a particularly prolific group, because Vessels was 2016, so it's been 5 years since the Bellacore
it's really been that long. God,
yeah, and the production of this one was obviously impacted by the Melbourne lockdown last year. So there's so much new music dropping right now.
Yeah, no, totally.
Between the Buried in Me album,
I pre-ordered a couple of things recently. I got the new Razor Eater EP is coming out, which is a grindcore band from the UK, which I really like. And yesterday I pre-ordered the new. It's like 4-way split album. 2 bands I really like on it called Wallowing and Slabdragger, doom metal sort of like crossover even. But yeah, very
Slabdragger's a good band name.
Oh, Slabdragger are fantastic. But unfortunately they don't release music very frequently, so the fact that they're doing anything new is very exciting for me. So yeah.
Well, slabs are heavy.
If you're a doom band, Slabdragger is probably the greatest name for a doom band.
Pretty much, but it does take a long time to drag a slag. To drag a slab. So one band that released a new single recently and has a new album coming out is Dream Theater.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about today. Yeah. Now, what I did with this was I thought I really want to cover Metropolis Part 2.
Yep.
I didn't want to go, let's just do images and words.
Yep.
Let's do something we can really sink our teeth into.
Okay.
But I also thought I wouldn't give you a copy of this album and go, right, well, you go, let's have fun.
Yeah.
And I felt like it needed a little bit of context. And so for that reason, I made you a little bit of a mixtape. I would have totally done an actual tape if I could have, because I know you like your cassettes. But instead, we went for a little sort of mix YouTube playlist.
That's it, yep.
Now, one thing I didn't know you were going to do is you've actually made notes in these. So it was kind of meant to be a bit of a auditory amuse-bouche.
Yeah.
But you've gone quite deep on it. So I don't know how much time we want to spend on it, but we can talk through.
We'll fire through my notes quickly, and I'll let you know what I thought. And
all right.
Sort of.
Now, the context of this wasn't me picking the best Dream Theater songs ever. This is me doing a bit of a, like I said, a bit of a representative sample of the band's like, and I kind of tailored it towards probably some of the heavier tracks that they have done deliberately. Mm-hmm. Rather than, like, Dream Theater have a lot of ballads. Dream Theater have a 12-step suite about Mike Portnoy's journey through Alcoholics Anonymous. They have a very, very wide-ranging, deep and eclectic discography. So this is no way a representative sample. Go listen to all of it. Come back to me in a couple of weeks. So first track I did for you in the mixtape was Pull Me Under, which is from Images and Words, which is I think it's their second album, and it's pretty much their breakthrough album. It's the first one with James LaBrie on the vocals. So what did you think of that then?
Okay, so my comments on this are that the production was a little thin. I thought the bass was quite lacking. But the songwriting was absolutely fine. It didn't feel like 8 minutes, so it definitely sort of like, I pushed through it quite nicely. It was a nice breezy thing considering how long it was, but it did sound very 90s, a little dated in the production quality. So that was my main impressions of that one.
I think that's really fair. And and look, the thing about Images and Words is, although it's an early 90s album, sometimes I think the production's even a little bit late 80s, and it definitely does have that thinness to it where it could benefit from remaster. The really weird thing about Pull Me Under is it ends mid bar.
Oh right, yeah.
Did you notice that it kind of cut off randomly? And you're like,
no,
what?
Not particularly, but then it's progressive music, so I was expecting weird shit.
Oh, no, this just cuts off with no warning, and it's apparently deliberate. It's a bit weird. So next up, we went straight into, because I had to do at least one Dream Theater ballad. I had to do a power ballad. You couldn't escape them, so we did Another Day, which is the next track off Images and Words.
Okay. So I really like the lead guitar melody on this one, and I think the piano was a better fit for Dream Theater than the cheesy sort of synthesizer noises that they use. So still very 90s sounding, and especially with the woodwind stuff on it, the fake strings. But
saxophone.
Absolutely.
I think it must be a soprano sax. Does a little solo on it. Yeah.
But the thing that I really noted about it, and what it reminded me of that I enjoyed, was that it was very him. So I very much enjoyed this one. So
that's interesting. One of the things about this one is that you've probably noticed that James LaBrie hits some extremely high notes.
He's got some range on it, hasn't he?
He's got some range, but sometimes I think that especially in the early albums, he's almost a little bit out of his range. Sounds a little bit out of his comfort zone. The highest notes in that, but it's it's a kind of a cheesy power ballad classic, that one. So then we went on to something completely different, which is the song that got me into Dream Theater, because it's pretty much the hardest track on Rock Band 2, and that is Panic Attack. And Panic Attack is off the album Octavarium. And this is definitely, I think it's probably among the heaviest songs they've done. So that's kind of as heavy as it gets. So what about this?
Yeah, really enjoyed this one. I love the little bass line intro, really cool sort of bass lick. A lot heavier than the previous tracks that we obviously covered. Very groovy. Really enjoyed the sort of movement of it. I think again the use of piano actually really heightens the sort of drama of the song. But yeah, it never loses its momentum. It's quite a fast track considering the length as well. The thing that really sort of stood out was the solos around the 5-minute mark are fantastic stuff there. Yeah, really enjoyed that.
I need to familiarise myself. Hold on, give me 2 minutes.
Here we go.
Oh yeah. It's got the big I remember it now, the synth solo, and it's got the really long dueling guitar and synth back and forth.
Right.
Yeah, that's
they love to do that keyboard.
They
solo
they really do. They really do. And sometimes I find it hard to tell which bit's which because it blends in and out. But it's also got a classic John Petrucci shreddy noodly solo.
Yeah, I'm guessing they run the keyboard through some sort of like overdrive effect or something because it gets a bit sort of.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I know Jordan Rudess has a lot of weird effects, and he usually has about three or four keyboards going, and he also has an app that he's developed.
Oh right, okay.
It's kind of like almost like a slide iPad keyboard.
Interesting.
That he's developed that he actually uses in their new albums as well.
Oh, cool.
Next up, we've got a really unconventional one from their most recent release at the time of recording, Distance Over Time. This is S2N, which is Signal to Noise, and I threw this one in to give you an idea of the more straight up prog rock homage tracks they do.
I also really enjoyed this one. It starts with another sort of groovy bass guitar intro, which I really liked. The first verse, the riff in that is really good. Again, nice bouncy sort of groove to a lot of the song. It was really good. And even when the instrumentation strips back, the drumming on this one is just phenomenal stuff. Really, really cool. Proper insane performance there. I really enjoyed that. And again, their proper face melting solo around 3 minutes. Really, really good stuff. It's just great.
It's very Rush.
Yeah,
it's very Rush,
totally.
that track. And we'll talk a bit about the prog influences in this, but I just think it's one of the most fun tracks I've done recently, and the bass sounds just so thick and like springy almost. It's It's a great one, but I thought you would enjoy that.
Yeah.
That's where Distance Over Time it's a little bit more. It's not quite as overwrought as some of the Dream Theater stuff has got.
Okay,
and you certainly see that near the end of the Portnoy era, like the Black Clouds album and stuff. It's quite long, and I think it's a track. It's 20 minutes long about some guy who might be a vampire in Tuscany on that album.
Wow. Okay.
And there's like a 16-minute track about a car accident. It's actually very good, but it's just a bit too much, and I feel like a single with Distance Over Time, they've kind of pared it back a little bit. Like there's still 9-minute tracks on it, it's I feel like it's a bit more at the essence of the band. There's a bit more vitality to it than they've had in past records. So next up, you couldn't escape a Dream Theater instrumental, and so we went for the delightfully named Erotomania, which is off Awake.
I think I said the dated production and the goofy keyboard sound kind of spoil this one. It all sounds a little too thin. I prefer the beefier, groovier sound on the last two tracks. It gets a bit cheesier and also quite fun around the 3-minute marks, and it reminded me a little bit more of Another Day. But then there's a really great solo around 5 minutes. Entirely instrumental, this one. It was fine. Like there was bits and pieces I liked out of it, but I do find the sort of goofy keyboard noises that sometimes he uses a little bit like silly and over the top. So this is that's actually a different keyboard player to the one on the album we're going to talk. So Images and Words in Awake, I can't even remember who the keyboardist. It might be like Derek someone. I'll look it up. But it's not. Jordan is only on the albums from Metropolis onwards. Oh, okay.
So next up, we've got another really heavy track.
Yep.
Off Train of Thought, which is probably their heaviest album overall. So we did This Dying Soul, which is also, I wasn't sure if your soul would be dying, but at this point you seem to have enjoyed it. That's good.
No, I very much enjoyed it. Yeah, no, I really like this song. Big double bass drummed intro, a lot more bass in the mix. Straight away, an outstanding solo at like 50 seconds, or just like, really grips you.
It's quite amazing that it opens with the solo.
I really like the sort of groovy, sludgy, breakdowny bit around 6 minutes as well. I think that's really fun. Another great solo around 10 minutes. Excellent drum fills on this one as well. It's a really good song. And again, I noted that it didn't really feel like 11 minutes, to be honest with you. It did so much in its time that it just flew on by. Really enjoyed that one.
We'll talk a little bit about the way this album, where we haven't even got to discussing yet, Classic Dream Theater, that it packs a lot in, and how we can compare and contrast that to the Gojira album. It's rare that we can actually do follow up. This Dying Soul, the last minute is just pure chaos, and it's got the amazing like drum syncopation. So the guitar's kind of shredding along, and it seems like he's just soloing.
Yeah.
But then you can hear that the drums are actually emphasizing the solo. It's going to go into...
Yeah.
It's really quite good. And then last up, because we had to, because it leads directly into this album, we did another track off Images and Words, which is Metropolis Part 1, The Miracle and the Sleeper.
Now, I've got the most notes for this one, because it's quite an intense, very, packs an awful lot in this song.
Yeah.
I like the big bombastic intro riff. I think that's really fun. Again, the thin sort of 90s production kind of betrays the music a little bit. But that's not to say that the writing and the instrumentation isn't great. It's just, it sounds a little, lacking. Lots of really fast snare fills on this one, and I find those a little bit annoying. The sort of, I just, they really overuse that. It's a little bit too sharp and a little bit reverby all around, the drums on this. That weird video game keyboard bit at 420 really made me laugh.
Sega Casio keyboards.
Yeah. Drums get heavier around 4:45, and there's a great little solo as well, which I really enjoyed. Yeah. Could have done with a little bit more of that sort of, drum pattern. 5:40, really like the fast bass riff that comes in. That's a really fun little addition.
Yes, it's like a bass solo.
Yeah. There's a keyboard solo around 6 minutes, and it's impressive, but the choice of sound is just so silly. It sounds like Mortal Kombat or something at 620 as well. Like, it gets very daft. The sheer amount of solos in the back half of that song is quite, astounding. It is just solo madness for a while. But yeah, so that was kind of like my main takeaway points with that. I came away kind of thinking that Dream Theater are quite a silly band, wondering if I was in for a hard time. Now I had to listen to an entire album that was a sequel to the song I just heard.
I've actually written in my notes that Dream Theater do indeed have a sense of humor, and Metropolis Part 1, the name of that song is a joke.
Right.
There wasn't intended to be a Metropolis Part 2.
Yeah.
And then eventually people kept asking where the sequel was. They're like, let's just do a whole album loosely based on the song that we had no intention of sequelizing. And I think that the way they do stuff is it's kind of silly stuff, but a fairly straight delivery at times. And that's that you find that with a lot of prog rock bands is sometimes they can be a little bit too straight laced.
Yeah.
And if you want to go to the goofy side, you've got like the Devin Townsend Ziltoid stuff, right?
Of course, yeah.
This is meant to be cheesy and funny. It's kind of silly ideas delivered with sincerity.
Yeah.
And
I kind of like that as like a concept, to be honest with you. It's like I want people, if you're going to make music and you're going to produce records and things like that, I feel like I want the best of anybody, right? I want the sincerity. I want an actual look, we were trying to make the best thing that we could at any given point. I don't care if it's comedic or straight-laced or whatever. I want I want it delivered at least with some sincerity, and Dream Theater absolutely have that in spades. Regardless of whether or not the songs sound a bit daft in places, they are at least doing that with full intensity and going for it as best as they can. But yeah, you can tell that there is some semblance of humour to the way that they structure things, just because it's nobody would have settled on that keyboard sound out of oh yeah, this is the best sounding keyboard sound. It was no, it sounds silly, it's fun, right? Let's put that in. But also, if you're going to use that, then go for it, and I think that's why it's cool that he solos with all these different effects and stuff in different points in the songs. I think it's really fun. So yeah, I was certainly given the primer before we jumped into Metropolis Part 2, but it's quite the thing, this record.
So how did you feel at the end of the mixtape? Did you feel like this is going to be interesting, or do you?
I had a feeling that I was probably going to prefer later Dream Theater, sort of 2000s era onwards, because the production was going to be more to my liking. It was going to be groovier. It was going to be sort of more bassy. And I was a little bit worried when I saw that Metropolis Part 2 is not It's from the 90s. So I was a little bit like, okay,
Well, it's
am I in
it's from
for an album?
'99.
Yeah.
Look, I think you're totally right in the production, and I don't want to harp on about the earlier albums because we need to
Yeah.
get to the meat of it eventually. But definitely, like Images and Words and Awake do have that thinner production.
Yeah.
And I think I think Images and Words is kind of a prog metal classic album, but the production is definitely one of the weaker points.
Yeah.
Now, but before I get hate mail, Kevin Moore is the keyboardist.
Okay.
He left during the recording of Awake,
Okay.
but he did write some of the songs for it. So he's the keyboardist in Images and Words.
Okay.
Then they did a couple of albums with Derek Sherinian.
Okay.
Presumably that's how you pronounce it. After that, they set up this prog metal supergroup called the Liquid Tension Experiment. And that is Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater, John Petrucci on the guitars, and the keyboardist Jordan Rudess. Then they got Jordan Rudess to join Theatre and replace Derek Sherinian. And the first album that he played on was Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from Memory. So this is the first album with what I would sort of call the classic lineup, if you like.
And I suppose the only other things that I really know about Dream Theater was Mike Portnoy left in sort of 2009, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He left after,
and that was like a big deal amongst metal. It seemed like at the time that was like, okay, well, Dream Theater's kind of done, right? If Mike Portnoy's gone.
Yeah, and look, I was one of those people. So the classic lineup is you've got Mike Portnoy, the drummer. You've got John Meehan. He's the bassist. You've got John Petrucci. He is the guitarist. And then they've also got James Labrie, who has done the vocals for the vast majority of their albums except the first one. And this is the first album with Jordan Rudess. And that is a lineup that they keep all the way from 99 to about 2009 when Portnoy leaves. And he was one of the founding members, Portnoy, so it was a big deal when he left. He was replaced by Mike Mangini, and he's been there ever since. And I guess the fan consensus on Mike Mangini ranges from he's fine to he's really good, as they have gradually integrated him into the band. He's certainly very technically capable, but I think in the first album, the Dramatic Turn of Events that he appears on, the drums are perfectly serviceable, but they don't have the level of imagination that you'd expect from a Dream Theater album. So Dream Theater are a prog metal band, and that means they're basically heavier prog rock. So the influences in this album are, yes, other metal bands, but there's also other prog rock bands, and in some ways Metropolis Part 2 is very much a prog rock tribute album, tour de force. And as we said, it's sort of a sequel that was never intended to be, and the concept of it, so it's about scenes from a memory, and the idea is that there's a guy called Nicholas who is sort of regressing into a past life through hypnotherapy, and he learns about this tragic turn of events, and it's all going to get a bit weird. So weird, in fact, that I have had to go to genius.com, the unofficial sponsor of this podcast. We should probably be paying them to figure out what is actually going on. And we can talk a little bit about I think we'll talk about the story and whether it is worth it, and how they could have possibly done it better near the end of the episode.
Okay.
So let's get into it.
So
just done a big stretch.
I've made notes. So I've made notes for each track, but to do that is kind of betraying the album somewhat. It's not supposed to be taken as songs, I don't think. It's very much a story, like you say. It's a singular piece with lots of movements, and that is, evidenced in the titles of the songs as well, because even though they have song titles, they all start with like scene 1, scene 2,
Yes. What we should do is we can just cut in the entire regression track, and people can go into the hypnotherapy experience with us. So the first track is Regression.
Close your eyes and begin to relax. Take a deep breath and let it out slowly. Concentrate on your breathing. With each breath, you become more relaxed. Imagine a brilliant white light above you. Focus in on this light as it flows through your body. Allow yourself to drift off as you fall deeper and deeper into a more relaxed state of mind. Now, as I count back from 10 to 1, you will feel more peaceful and calm.
And that is just a spoken word introduction with where Nicholas goes to the hypnotherapist and he hypnotizes him down. Mm-hmm. And then he goes into a hypnotic trance and he begins to see a girl named Victoria, and he begins to have these weird feelings of a life that is strangely familiar to him. Mm-hmm. Then we go into the first track, well, the first real track, I guess.
Yep.
Which is Overture 1928.
Okay, so instantly I was like, okay, the production is still a little thin, but the snare isn't so harsh and reverby as we've had on some of the older 90s stuff. Keyboards are still a little cheesy, but there's some great solos around 150 that I really liked, and this track is entirely instrumental as well, so that was kind of your first impressions initially. So I was like, okay, I'm probably going to be okay with this one. It's not quite as 90s as I was expecting, but it's still a little thin. I would have preferred a little more bass in the mix personally, but it by no means betrays the music and the actual songwriting. It's very much just a personal preference, and I know we've been through this before. Even in our first episode, that was one of my major complaints about Iron Maiden was that their production is very thin and lacks a lot of bass.
Wouldn't necessarily disagree with you. I think the production here is way better than the early 90s stuff.
Yeah,
for sure.
Agreed.
But so an overture is traditionally an instrumental introduction to like a ballet or an opera, and it's essentially a condensed version of all the major musical themes. And a really good example is the William Tell overture, which is so that's, we've all heard that. You've definitely heard that. You've heard it better than I just did it. And another one would be like, I used to play the overture to Bernstein's opera Candide in the high school wind band on the saxophone. So that's kind of ingrained in my memory. It's not an overture is not something you hear a lot of in rock or metal, but this is a specific introduction to all of the songs and the main riffs, and I just think it's a bucket of fun. It's pretty much all my favorite bits in a 4-minute track.
It was fine. I didn't like outright go, that was great or that was bad or whatever. It was very much just a case of like, okay, I'm soaking in an instrumental here and just trying to pick apart like what I'm going to be hearing and things like that for the record.
And that's why it's not as coherent as some of their other instrumentals, because it's meant to be a taster of what you're going to hear. That's what makes it an overture. And as you said, this is a complete piece of work. It's not necessarily an album you can just break down track by track. So that's the context of it. So if you're listening at home, you think that was a bit weird. Well, yeah, there's plenty more weird bits to come, but that's the context for it. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be something you put on your running playlist.
It's going to be fun picking clips for this episode because everything is going to sound so dramatically different to each other.
I have had mercy in you, and I have made copious timestamp notes.
Okay.
So hopefully you can plug some of it in.
Oh, that'd be lovely. Thank you very much. I very appreciate that.
So let's get thinking about you. I'm determined for you to have as good a time as possible, whether you love the album or whether you merely tolerate it, but at least the notes were good. All right. So then we got the next, probably the first. I know I just said the first real track. This is the first real track. This is Strange Deja Vu.
So this is sort of proper vocal sung song, I guess. Vocals kick in, and there's a really nice chunky riff to accompany them on this one as well. I really like the melody that you get around 2 minutes. I think that's nice and dramatic. I think the piano accompaniment really elevates this song as well, heightens the drama of the whole piece. You get a really good like bluesy groove around like 2:40, which is kind of fun. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, overall, I came away like that was a good song. I very much enjoyed this one. Very much enjoyed it.
So this one, it's a pretty heavy intro track at first. We kind of get straight into it, and you get the da 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 da, and it's quite typical Dream Theater. We've got a lot of technical, complicated drums and guitars, and I'm not sure what the time signatures are in this, or whether it's particular. I think this is just a 4/4, but there's a lot of weird shit that's going to go on in this. The bass isn't too prominent in the mix most of the time, and as you'd said, we could do with a bit more of it. And John Mayen is kind of an underrated element of the band, I always feel. And then you feel like, as you say, you kind of feel like, get the idea of this. It's a little bit of a narration. It's got a kind of riff. And then you get the chorus. You go, okay, I see where this is going. And then at 2 minutes 38 on the dot, it gets funky.
Yeah, it's great. It's wicked.
And I think it's probably one of my favourite Petrucci riffs. And what I really like about it is it kind of twists and evolves through the rest of the song. It's not just that one riff over and over. It actually changes up a little bit. And then it goes a bit higher up the neck and a bit lower. But it's really, really fun opener to the album. And I'm so glad you said you enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, honestly, it was a really great song. I honestly can't fault it. Like I say, my main complaint, you think, always keep it in the back of the mind that like I'm not too keen on the lack of bass in the production, but I can still appreciate the musicianship and the songwriting. And I definitely came away from Strange Deja Vu thinking that was a good song. Like there's, it's not betrayed by its production by any means. And I'm sure with, a great hi-fi system and all your equalizer options, you can add the bass that you want back into it, right?
Look, it sounds pretty beefy in my headphones, especially last night when I was blocking out the vacuum. Vacuuming to prog metal is my taste. It was remiss of me to leave out the story because I meant to be narrating you through this. So in this Strange Deja Vu, Nicholas begins. I'm reading the thanks to G-Dog Centaur, who's written this. Nicholas begins to see memories of a past life, and in this past life, his name is Victoria, and he feels that he's had these memories before, and he tries to figure out why Victoria's memories keep haunting him. He starts to think that there's some kind of reason why he sees his strange visions, and so what happens with the choruses and stuff is that it's both the voice of Victoria in the past and the voice of Nicholas in the present echoing each other, and that's what they're talking about. He's talking about he feels like he's going out of my head, it tears my soul into two. I'm not the one I thought I always knew. So he's got this strange deja vu, and he doesn't mind, and he hopes to find the truth. What do you think of James LaBrie's singing?
I really like it. I think he hits a comfortable range on this record, which feels like it comes to him naturally. It doesn't feel like he's overexerting himself, but at the same time, I think he's a very effective vocalist, and I think there's an awful lot of drama to his his vocals. I think he elevates the sort of atmosphere and the drama that they're trying to go through throughout the entire record. I thought he was great, to be honest with you. I didn't feel like there were particular vocal moments that were massively like outstanding. I was like, that really took me by surprise. But there were genuine vocal melodies that I pick up on various tracks throughout this song where I was just like, oh, this guy's effective. Like very, very solid vocal melody. And at no point did I feel like he was a bad vocalist by any means. I think he's a very, very good singer.
He is a very, I wouldn't say controversial.
Okay.
But he's a very polarizing singer.
Okay.
And sometimes people really like his stuff and sometimes they really don't like his. One of the interesting things about James LaBrie is, this is me on Wikipedia, in 1994 he had a severe case of food poisoning and he ruptured his vocal cords.
Oh, okay.
And he saw 3 throat specialists who said there was nothing they could do except have him rest his voice. And this was when he was touring to promote Awake.
Oh,
he said he didn't feel vocally normal until about 2002 when the Dream Theater recorded 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. And he basically said, instead of hitting D's and E's and F sharps, I was able to hit C, C sharp and D. I had to really watch it. I've hit F's here and there. I have to really watch it. It's probably the darkest moment of my life. So he has actually had And it's interesting that he's not hitting those super high notes.
Yeah.
But I think because he's quite restrained in the vocal range, I think it suits him a lot better. And he does have a good sort of dramatic tenor style voice. I think he's with very, very clear enunciation.
Definitely.
Lyrics in metal.
Yeah.
You can really hear this, and it's a perfect fit for the material if you're going to have really narrative lyrics that are meaningful.
Yeah.
It very much helps. There are some times, like when he sings the last word, I hope to find that. Sometimes he can sound a little bit like a rooster. But on the whole, like I think he's a really, really good vocalist. I think sometimes he's got the goofy lyrics, but that's not his fault.
It comes with the territory, I'm afraid. It's prog music, right?
If you think this is goofy, they just released a new song called "The Alien,"
right?
And some of the Dream Theater lyrics get really cringeworthy at times. So next up is "Through My Words."
All your eyes have ever seen, all you've ever heard, is etched upon my memory. Spoken through my words. All that I take with me is all you've left behind. We're sharing one eternity, living into mine.
Sort of a little sung interlude, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is just a little interlude bit, and the whole point of this is that Nicholas realizes that he was Victoria in a past life.
Okay.
So he starts to understand. He says, all you've ever heard is etched upon my memory, spoken through my words, sharing one eternity, living in two minds, linked by an endless thread, impossible to break. Now you have to get on with this album. You have to accept the central conceit. Okay. Which is that people get reincarnated at the end of their lives, and they're all connected, and their souls kind of transfer from body to body. Yeah. And I believe that after we're gone, the spirit carries on. So if you understand that, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so it's that's kind of the context in which all this happens. So that's Through My Words. It's really not a lot to say. It's kind of an intro to the next track. Not really, hope you like weird power ballads, Lewis, because there's going to be a couple of them.
So we move into Fatal Tragedy then. Continues with the sort of singing and the piano accompaniment from the previous track. Then the 35-second mark, we get the full instrumentation comes in. The music has a really sort of cool stompiness to it on this one. I really like the stompy sort of Rammstein-y kind of groove to it. Maybe not as overtly Rammstein, but you know what I mean. It's got a nice marching quality to it.
I wrote chugging and driving.
Yeah, definitely. We get some silly church organ sounding keyboards around 2 minutes, which I had to make a note of.
We do.
Double bass drumming starts around 2:30 and continues the sort of stompy nature of the song as well, which I really enjoyed. Really good groove around 4 minutes. And I found that the back half of this song was a lot heavier.
Yes.
Really great solo around 5 minutes. Again, I came away from this one feeling like, good song. Really enjoyed that.
So this one... Okay, so the narrator takes a pause. So Fatal Tragedy. So Nicholas wants to find out what's going on with these dreams, and when I sleep at night, I hear the cries. What does this mean? So he wants to find out why Victoria has been haunting him, what it's all about. So he then in one of his visions, he sees this house, and he goes to find an old man. And the old man seems to be on his own, and he says, "Lad, did you know a girl was murdered here? This fatal tragedy was talked about for years." And so he realizes that Victoria was murdered in her own house, and it was this fatal tragedy.
I see.
And so as the night goes on, Nicholas started to find a way, and he learned about a tragedy, a mystery still today. He tried to get more answers, but the man says, "You're on your own." Then he turned away and left me as I stood there all alone. And he said, "You'll know the truth as your future days unfold." So perhaps he too is some kind of reincarnation. So the intro to this is quite Supertramp. And this is where I talk about there's a lot of prog rock, and it's got the dim, 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 kind of syncopated piano bit.
Yep.
And then you kind of think, I see where this is going. You know, I think I know where this is going, but you actually don't. And after 2 minutes, it starts to get very different. You get organs and a very Queen-esque guitar noise. That kind of wow. I don't know. I don't even know what the technical term is, but it sounds like Queen.
Yeah.
And then you get, as you say, the chugging driving section and the best sing-along bit for fans, which is try to get more answers, but he said you're on your own.
Yeah.
That's a good shouty one.
Yeah.
And then around 4 minutes, it's just balls to the walls. You got these thunderous drums, loads of really snappy fills. You got a big extended solo section. You get shredding. The guitars and the keyboards are playing off each other. And I particularly like, there's a bit around 4:20, plays it, when the keys have the lead and the guitar's harmonizing. It's like a thick, choppy sound.
Yeah.
It's like it's just a really interesting sound.
It's really good fun. Yeah,
it's really good fun, and then you get a massive noodly guitar solo, and I think the breakdown at the end, where it's the kind of that is amazing, and I love how and what I really like is at the very end of it, it fades out, and you just got that piano vamp, and you get It's a really nice way to finish it, and then the hypnotist says, "Now it's time to see how you died. Remember that death is not the end, but only a transition."
I missed that little bit of narration there because I've picked up. Specifically in the last track, when we get to it, I'll mention it. But yeah, it's because I was coming into this fresh and I didn't do any sort of like prior research or about the story and the overall theme. I was very much taking everything on face value. I was very much listening to music and how it was working and how like the the songs were structured and things like that. So as much as I enjoyed melodies and vocal performances and the drumming and these amazing solos and things like that, I wasn't quite picking up on the plot. I wasn't taking that in, unfortunately. So I'm glad you're giving me that extra context, because I think it's going to help maybe in a re-listen to actually maybe appreciate a little bit more what they were trying to do. Because again, I feel like the way I've listened to it for this podcast, and I'm taking track notes, and I was taking breaks at points as well, because it is a very long record. It's not really the way you're supposed to listen to it. I think you need to take a moment, put a brew on. So that's the only thing you're doing for the evening, is you're going to listen to Metropolis Part 2 and just listen to it from the back. Yeah.
Look, if I'm being honest, I have never really sat down and read the plot to this.
Yeah.
Before we started recording this episode, I've been quite content to kind of have a vague idea of some bullshit about somebody called Victoria, and it probably makes sense somehow.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfectly legitimate way to listen to this.
Yeah.
But the difference is that the liner notes actually tell you whose voice bits are being sung in.
Yeah. And I think that context would have been nice, maybe, if I go back to it for another time.
To address this now and not save it till the end of the album, one of the things that makes it very confusing to understand what was going on is that James LaBrie is doing multiple parts of Victoria and Nicholas, and the Miracle and the Sleeper, who will come in later, all at the same time. Now, this also happens in a Dream Theater album called The Astonishing. Are you familiar with The Astonishing?
I can't say I am.
Right, I'm going to Google. I'm just going to read the Wikipedia description.
Okay.
This is going to blow your mind. This is how ridiculous they have gotten. Okay, so Dream Theater released The Astonishing, which is the album before Distance Over Time. Mm-hmm. So Dream Theater is the band's second concept album, with a story conceived by John Petrucci and music written by Petrucci and Jordan Rudess. It is set in a dystopian future, United States, and follows the Ravenskill rebel militia in their efforts to defy the great Northern Empire of the Americas using the magical power of music.
That's so prog. I love it.
This is a double album. It's 130 minutes long, and so it's got 2 acts where the Great Northern Empire of the Americas are using noise machines instead of humans. The empire is ruled by Emperor Nefarious, Empress Arabelle, Crown Prince.
A little bit on the
Darius,
nose there, lads.
Emperor. No, it's Nefarious with a Y.
I see. There we go. That's
so totally different. And Jess and I went to see this live in London, where they performed just the entirety of The Astonishing. And it was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. One of the weirdest gigs. It was really fun.
Yeah.
But one of the weird. So it's been described as an honest to God rock opera, and you've got James LeBrie doing the voices of like Nefarious and the main character Gabriel and all this stuff, and he's trying to do different vocal accents, which is obviously incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work. The biggest problem with The Astonishing is that
it's not astonishing.
Yeah, well, it is certainly astonishing, but not in a good way. The problem with it is it's 2 hours. It's like 2 hours long or something, and I can only tell you one good song of it, which is "Moment of Betrayal," and it just sort of glazes over you. It's really, really difficult to enjoy.
Yeah,
and that's where I think this gets it right, because the songs are individually enjoyable.
Yeah.
Whereas I just can't The Astonishing has 5-minute long tracks, which are all Numax instrumentals from these noise machines making weird noises.
Oh god, that sounds intense.
It truly is bizarre. Somebody plays bagpipes. It's really like it's too much.
Yeah,
it's too much. And thank fuck they went on to do Distance Over Time, because so it's truly bizarre. I'll try and get into it another time, but you can go off the deep end with these things.
Yeah.
So I think one of the most confusing things about Metropolis Part 2 is that James LeBrie's doing multiple vocal parts.
Yeah. I couldn't lock into different characters for certain.
So I don't think you could really listen to this and understand what's going on. It's too hard. So I wouldn't expect anyone to do that. And it only makes sense to me now, laying out the whole thing. But the liner notes do explain it, and I think also whenever they perform this live, either the album liners or some kind of programs explain some of the key bits in it.
That's pretty cool.
Anyway, on to the next track, Beyond This Life. So Nicholas begins to uncover the details of Victoria's death by looking into the murder. And reports from the crime have been revealed by a witness who stated that her boyfriend had killed her after he had learned about an affair, and then in regret the boyfriend had turned the gun on himself. But Nicholas doubts that the witness's accusations are valid and continues to search for deeper meaning through the visions he keeps seeing. Thanks, G-Dog Centaur. So this sort of opens up with headline: Murder, young girl killed, desperate shooting at Echoes Hill, dreadful ending, killer died, evidently suicide. Apparently they wrote news headlines in rhyme.
Yeah, it's a good skill if you can have it, right?
It's like those people that write the Sun headlines. They're like, I will appreciate the wordplay even if I don't appreciate the cause for which the words have been drawn.
Oh god. But yeah, this starts with a really cool thrashy riff on this one. It was nice to see a little bit more variety in the guitar work. But unfortunately, those stupid keyboard sounds come back, and are kind of hard. Yeah, I think this unfortunately kind of spoiled this song for me a little bit. There's a great solo around 3:10. Pace picks up around 3:30. Gets very dreamy and floaty around 5 minutes. A thrashy sound sort of comes back around 6 minutes. We get a keyboard solo at 6:20. Bluesy kind of guitar solo around 7:20. Solos continue until around 10 minutes. More hideous keyboard sounds. It's right. So this one, I've got to say, I think is a little bit long in the tooth. And despite the fact that I have just listed lots of different parts and all these different things going on, I feel like it still didn't do enough to justify being 11 minutes long. It's basically a thrashy part and then also a nice dreamy floaty part, but then to load of solos with it. That's kind of the structure of this one. And I feel like, unfortunately, I wasn't engaged for all of it, I'm afraid. And yeah, it gets beyond absurd sometimes with the keyboard sounds. So yeah, it was a difficult thing to push through, unfortunately, on this one. This was probably one of the first times I thought, okay, maybe this is a little bit too much for me.
Yeah. So this is probably, at least at the beginning, it's probably the heaviest track on the album.
Yeah, the thrashy stuff sounds great. Don't you? And
you get, I quite like the beginning section of that sort of, it's like a call and response. We get the sort of strip back, just the drumming and the wow, 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 wow. And then you get this big, when it comes back in with the drums.
Yeah.
And especially the Crush 40 moment at 350. And James Bree's like, oh, yeah. That's good. And then about 4 minutes, it really ramps up in intensity and it gets into quite a comfortable, heavy groove.
Yeah.
And as you say, there's this, you've got this sort of, where is it? Yeah, it's the our deeds have travelled far, what we have been is what we are. This sort of comes quite back a lot, the floaty part.
Yeah.
And that's the whole, it's kind of regressing back and forth as he figures out what's going on. There's a massive prog rock jam at the end of this, and this is where you can hear so many different prog bands in it.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of like Yes in there, I think, in the keyboards, especially that slightly organ twinge keyboard sound. You get a bit of Yes, quite a bit of Rush in there. One of the bluesy riffs, the is very Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. I can totally hear that. Yeah.
And it's got a bit of everything. Like it is quite a long song, even by their standards.
Yeah.
I think it's got just about enough progression and variation, but I could have done with less of the floaty bits.
Yeah.
I think the return to the floaty bit, especially at the end of the song, is what makes it a little bit too long.
Yeah.
But I guess this is where I wanted to compare it. This is the follow-up from Gojira last time, and I said I don't think that these songs have enough movement and actual progression to get you to the end of them. And this to me is not this track in particular, but we talk a little bit of Fatal Tragedy. We'll talk a bit about it on Home. In order to do a song that's about 10 or 11 minutes long, it has to change things up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I feel like this to me is how you do it, and that's where I found the Gojira stuff. It's like this could have been condensed by a couple of minutes. We could have left something in the cutting room floor.
Interesting.
We're kind of just repeating ourselves.
Yeah, it's funny that we've come at that again, different angles. You're like, there's more than enough here to keep you entertained. But I think for me, it was a little bit long in the tooth. So.
No, I think this is both a track I thought you would really enjoy the heavy bits, but I also thought that I also think it probably is too long.
Yeah,
it's probably the track that
fair enough.
Probably one of the tracks that drags the most on the album.
Yeah.
Not that I would skip it because it's obviously central to the plot.
Absolutely. It's not a skipper by any means, but I just don't. I felt like it was like it just dragged personally for me. It was a little bit too much song and not enough ideas, unfortunately.
So then we get on to Through Her Eyes, or as I have written in my notes, the Pink Floyd track.
She never really had a chance on that fateful moonlit night, sacrificed without a fight, a victim of a circumstance. Now that I've become aware and I've exposed this tragedy, a sadness grows inside of me. It all seems so unfair.
Yeah, so this starts with a kind of new agey sound, doesn't it, with a sort of female vocal accompaniment. I thought at some point Leanne Rimes was going to go, "How can I live without you?"
You're gonna good fun syncing those audio clips together. How can I breathe? So this one, Nicholas learns that Victoria was completely innocent, and he starts to empathise with her, and he realises that the images are not going to stop haunting him until he solves the real mystery behind the fatal tragedy. So he says, I'm learning all about my life by looking through her eyes.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately,
it's quite cheesy.
Yeah.
He goes to the churchyard. He reads this Just beyond the churchyard gates where the grass is overgrown, I saw the writing on her stone. I felt like I would suffocate. In loving memory of our child, so innocent, eyes open wide, I felt so empty as I cried, like part of me had died.
So sad.
Which in a sense, it had. For it was part of him, because he'd been reincarnated, right? That's the whole point.
I thought this track was a bit boring. The instrumentation kind of picks up around a minute in, but the drums are so naff. It's like an R&B song or something. Really strange. But the melody on this one is mainly drawn from an acoustic guitar melody and the piano as well. It wasn't like full electric, metal band experience when the instrumentation picks up. It's very much a more sort of stripped down kind of R&B track. It's very strange. I didn't expect this to come up into Dream Theater album. So I was like, oh, okay, I don't know if I really wanted that. Thanks. But
Dream Theater have a bit of a guilty pleasure with ballads.
Yeah,
which is why you got that's why you got Another Day on there. They pretty much always do a ballad, and that's one of the problems with Dramatic Turn of Events. It's got like some absolute amazing shredders on it. It's also got like 3 or 4 incredibly long ballads on it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's their strongest suit.
No, I agree completely. I mean, which is strange because we talked about Another Day, and I quite liked it because it was quite cheesy and like fun, and but it's more condensed, right? Like whereas this is, we've got like one idea really, and it's just like a bit dull, unfortunately. So yeah,
and it feels like it's there just to fill in the story, but perhaps not the strongest musically.
Yeah, which is a shame. Speaking of the strongest musically, though.
Speaking of the strongest musically, we can move on to the next track, which is called Home. So Home is about Nicholas returning to Victoria's home, or his home, to unlock the true reason why Victoria is dead. And this is where a lot of this is actually not from Nicholas's perspective. It's from the sleeper, who is he was the wayward man in the earlier story and also in the first part of Metropolis. And basically, the sleeper is a guy called Julian, and Victoria leaves him due to his cocaine addiction. That's why he says, "Lines take me higher," very subtle. And hooks up with his brother, Edward, who is the miracle in the story. So that's the sleeper and the miracle.
There we go.
The miracle and the sleeper. So that's what that's about. There you go. Might as well carry on with the silly storiness.
Yeah.
So that's what Home is about. And the intro to this sounds a lot like Tool's 46 and 2.
Yeah, I was totally hearing that. Yeah, absolutely. It's got that sort of Asiatic guitar sound to it. Really cool stuff.
It's more the bass. It's the
that bass line is great. I've noticed that sort of kicks in around 1 minute, and then the instrumentation sort of like properly kicks off around 1:40. That riff that kicks off, that big groovy riff is really good. I like that a lot.
The wow, and it's like, this is a really intricate song, and it takes about 4 minutes to actually get to the chorus.
Yeah. But like again, I was engaged, so like it's doing enough for me. Like I was very much enjoying this. 2:30, we get that really big stompy guitar riff as well, which really had my attention. It's really good. Some great dramatic vocal melodies in the chorus on this one. I definitely highlighted this as a big chorus. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Solo at 5 minutes, and it still carries on the sort of Eastern sound that you get from the start of the song as well. I quite really like that sort of like revisiting that idea. Thought that was really cool. 8:40, song picks up with a belter of a keyboard solo that leads into another guitar solo, so we do that back and forth. I thought this was fantastic. I think this is a brilliant song.
So this one, it ends with 3 guitar solos back to back.
Yep.
From 9 minutes 22, so 8:41 for your stitching purposes. That's where the keyboard solo comes out. Yep. Then you get 3 back-to-back guitar solos. The first is quite laid back for Petrucci.
Yeah.
Second one is the classic Petrucci syncopated triplets and noodling.
Yep.
And the third one is Noodling and Shredding, and it's absolute magic. And I think I was walking the dog yesterday listening to it, and I was like, I'm going to rewind that. Then we go back to the chorus, and while this song is structurally quite conventional, then you get about 20 time changes in the space of a minute, which is basically just a warm-up for what's to come, and it goes absolutely nuts at the end. So here's your quiz.
So good.
So here's your quiz, Lewis.
Go on.
Now, this song has a connection with the Sega game.
Oh.
This song has a really obscure sample that is used in a Sega game.
Oh, shit.
And, okay, so I have the sample for you. I'm going to play the sample for you now.
Okay.
It is from the Hollywood Edge sound effects library. It's called Dealer Calls Out Dice Throws. So hopefully you'll be able to hear this.
9 a winner. Pay the front line, take the don'ts. He's coming out again for a new point. 4-4's the point, mark 4. Who wants the hard 4? 5 wants 4. Ace, deuce, craps wants 4.
Oh, God. Yep, I know it.
All right, what's your answer?
It's Jet Set Radio Future.
Well, let's find out.
9 a winner. Pay the front line, take the don'ts. He's coming out again for a new point. Get your bets down, ladies and gentlemen. 4-4's the point, mark 4. Ace, deuce, craps wants 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 4. Ace, deuce, ace, deuce, crap wants 4. Crap wants 4.
So this song does indeed use the same sample as Hideki Naganuma's Funky Dealer from Jet Set Radio Future.
Yes. I was going to say as well, actually. So one of the only other times I'm familiar with Dream Theater through something else is John Petrucci did the theme song for a Sega Saturn pinball game called Digital Pinball Necronomicon.
Oh my god. Is it a good theme tune?
Yeah, I was like, okay, there is, again, one of these things where it's like, somehow this band has come into my sphere through a Sega connection. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. This might be some further listening for the listeners. Go and check out the Necronomicon theme from Digital Pinball.
You have no idea how long I spent on the internet trying to figure out what the actual thing was connected to Funky Dealer, and I was so excited when I found it on whosampled.com.
Excellent.
And it's only been sampled by Funky Dealer, Home, and some song called 5 Juice 4 Tray by somebody called Backbone, which is some kind of hip-hop song.
Okay, interesting.
But I'm so glad you got that.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be perhaps a little bit too obscure, but
no.
The sample's too good. But yeah, you will hear that. You will hear that in the middle of Home.
There we go.
Yeah. What a great song.
It is
What
awesome.
a great song.
Really, really good stuff. I enjoyed that a lot. So, next up, we've got The Dance of Eternity. Give me the context for this one?
Yes, the context of this one is that Edward, Julian's brother, seduces Victoria.
Okay.
And so the Dance of Eternity is it's about her sort of emotional swirl as she thinks about the two guys, and it's a bit when she has sex, which is the ragtime piano playing.
Oh god.
At least that's what people have theorized. So the intro to this actually echoes Metropolis Part 1.
Okay.
That's where the opening lick comes from. It's a somewhat innocuous build-up, and then there's 6 minutes of instrumental prog metal insanity.
Yeah. The main takeaway I had from this one was I kind of found it a bit annoying. So yeah, you got that weird video gamey kind of keyboard riff at the start of this one. It's really like bizarre and off kilter, this song. It doesn't quite settle into a groove at any given point. It is just an onslaught of weird video game keyboard noises. Technically proficient instrumentation from everyone, don't get me wrong, but oh god, it was really hard to get past the keyboard on this one. Sound choices are just really irritating. The one thing I liked in particular was the bass solo around 310. I think that's a really insane little solo. That's really cool. But yeah, an entirely instrumental track, and unfortunately a little bit annoying for me.
So this is a bit of a Dream Theater dividing line, because at this point people are like, this is genius, or this is just people wanking their instruments. Really. And I think it's borderline. So this song has 108 time signature changes.
Bloody
and I sent Lewis a video of Mike Portnoy going through the time signature changes, and he said that playing it live still gives him nightmares. And you said something like, "I just wonder if it was all worth it."
I feel that way. It's still now. Look, right. There is nothing more impressive than watching a musician master their fucking material and their instrument and just be on it. It is a fantastic thing to watch sometimes, right? But in isolation on an album where you're just trying to settle into a nice groove and try and understand what a band are about, when you do things like this, it's just like, lads, like, I need music, I need hooks, I need songs, and unfortunately all you're doing here is just like, look at how well I can play my instrument, and it doesn't make for an interesting listen in isolation. I think if you saw it live, I think you'd zone in on like whatever instrument that you favour. I'd probably be looking at a bass player and go, "Oh, this is just impressive! Like, how cool is that?" Yeah. But on an album, I think it's just a bit annoying. Unfortunately, it's just this weird divergence into annoying.
Look, it's very proggy.
Yeah.
I think I definitely agree with you that the keyboard sound. There's one bit is like it's like that's a bit strange. I do think that it's actually quite good at although there's a lot going on, I think it's quite good at building things up and then providing a bit of a cathartic release.
Yep.
Especially the bit near the end where the guitar kind of goes. That's a good kind of like, okay, we're there.
Yeah.
So I think it's dramatically interesting, but it's taxing to listen to, and it is 6 minutes long.
Yeah,
yes. 108 time signature changes apparently.
Absolutely mad.
That's absolutely mad. It's technically very impressive, but you probably only need to hear it once.
Yeah.
So then we get on to One Last Time. One last time, Nicholas continues to search for the clues that will lead him to solve Victoria's death. He is suspicious of Edward and the affair, and he returns back to his house and he finally remembers what happened. He remembers that Edward was the true killer and that he had set up the crime scene and posed as a witness to cover himself.
Well, there we go. So this one is a slower paced song with a sort of piano-led intro, vocals kicking in around 30 seconds. I noted that One Last Time is also the same title as a hymn song from Razorblade Romance, and it also reminded me quite a lot of him because it's got that sort of gothy, forlorn, sort of moody rock song quality to it, and another incredible guitar solo around 2 minutes. I very much enjoyed One Last Time. It reminded me a lot of Another Day, sort of another sort of ballady kind of track, but again it had that sort of goth rock hymn quality to it, so I was like, I'm on board. So yeah, very much enjoyed this.
I think it's good, and it's a nice break after Dance of Eternity.
This
is quite short by Dream Theater standards and fairly harmless, but geez, there's quite a lot of ballady tracks in this.
Yeah. No,
but I think this one's good, and it does have good canon value with the whole One Last Time. That'll we'll come back to that later.
Yeah. Cool stuff. We'll move on.
Short and sweet.
Yeah,
short
absolutely.
and sweet.
Next up, we have The Spirit Carries On. give me the spiel. What are we going on with this one?
Okay. So, Spirit Carries On is Nicholas is under hypnosis once again, and he reiterates his belief that his soul will transcend and he need not fear death. He now believes Edward was involved in the murder and he plans to expose the truth behind it, but Victoria appears to Nicholas and tells Nicholas to move on. At this point, he feels at peace as he feels he's appeased Victoria and his own obsession. And the ultimate message is that death is not the end, but only a transition. So he says, if I die tomorrow, I'll be all right, because I believe after we're gone, Spirit carries on. And Victoria says, move on, be brave, don't weep at my grave, because I'm no longer here. But please never let your memory of me disappear. So there you go. And he says he's safe in the light that surrounds him. He knows Victoria's real. He feels at peace. He's perfectly clear. He knows what it all means.
Yeah, and I think that's echoed very well through the music, actually. It's quite a hopeful sounding, sort of soft rock, sort of cheesy song, this one.
Yeah.
But I think, what with it being another ballad after a ballad, I came away feeling like that was fine, but it was nothing special, because at least One Last Time had the benefit of coming off something that sounded massively different in comparison, whereas this kind of continues that sort of piano-led vocals like accompaniment with it. Instrumentation sort of picks up around 1:30, but it's only really drums and acoustic guitar that gets added to the mix. There's not an awful lot of electric guitar in this. But yeah, there's a great solo around 4 minutes, so there is at least some use of electric guitar. But then the real silly, overt, like, oh, okay, this is a prog band, I forgot about that. A bloody choir at 4 minutes 30.
Yeah. So I'll probably take a bit of flack from Dream Theater fans for this, but I just think it's one ballad too many.
Yeah, agreed.
I do really like the guitar solo. It's very good.
Yep.
And it's definitely a fan favorite solo for sure. I think it's very different because it shows that, you know, John's not just a shredder.
No. I think he's a fantastic guitarist across this.
He's fantastic, like at emotional solos.
Yeah.
I was trying to do a top 5 John Petrucci solos for this episode and really struggled. I'll do that. I'll do that at the end. We can fight it out. But I tend to like his noodly shreddy ones. But this is a really nice one too. Yeah. I just feel like it's a bit too much, and it comes right after One Last Time. And at this point, we are quite late into the album. You know, we're starting to get a bit tired here.
Yeah. It's a fine song, but I wouldn't say it was anything special. Let's put it that way. So yeah.
But it is over, and you don't have to listen to any more ballads because we are finally free.
Yeah, finally free.
You are once again surrounded by a brilliant white light. Allow the light to lead you away from your past into this lifetime. As the light dissipates, you will slowly fade back into consciousness, remembering all you have learned. When I tell you to open your eyes, you'll return to the present, feeling peaceful and refreshed. Open your eyes, Nicholas.
Yeah, right. Okay, so this is the thing I wanted to mention, actually. So obviously we only get the narrator at the very start, and then a little bit in the middle, which I didn't pick up on, right? At the end here, this is the first time I overtly heard the character name Nicholas. So I was a bit like, is he calling me Nicholas? Imagine if your name was actually Nicholas and you heard this for the first time. It would fucking, you were like, whoa! So yeah, it was kind of strange. I didn't, because like I say, I hadn't really picked up on characters and things throughout the record. It was very much, I was zoning in on the narrator when there were spoken words more than I was the actual song vocals. So yeah. Interesting track, this. A big old album closer. 12-minute long. It's quite an intense thing. It doesn't really pick up full band instrumentation until around 2:50 as well, so it's quite a long introduction as well. Quite a delicate song with lots of piano melodies. There's this like a battle scene almost at 4:30 with like that really overused public domain female scream.
You did Wilhelm scream.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, it becomes more of an overblown sort of stadium rock piece. Like as it progresses. At 5:30 we get sort of really overindulgent guitar solo to really set things off. 7:30, I get a lovely groovy riff shows up as well. I came away from this one feeling like it was fine. It was fairly dramatic and overblown, but I just didn't feel like it did enough in its 12 minutes for me.
So I think this is a really nice coda to the album, and I really like that it returns to existing ideas, the way the overture precedes them. It adds this new spin on them, and that makes, and this is what we talked about at the beginning, it makes it more of a cohesive, holistic piece of work than a bunch of vaguely related songs on a theme. But it's an interesting finish because it's quite laid back and luxurious. I could imagine this being the closing credits, like a Sonic Adventure game or something.
No, totally. It's got
we've returned the emeralds. We're finally free.
Yeah, we've got that sort of hopeful sound as well from like The Spirit Carries On in this one as well. Yeah, totally.
And the solo at 5:30 is just smooth as caramel.
Oh,
and so this reveals the twist ending of the story of Victoria Nicholas. So what happens is the comedic fight. What happens is you find out that actually. So what happens is Victoria, seeing this guy Julian, he's a coke addict. She cheats on him with his brother. Mm-hmm. Then she has the realization in a dance of eternity that actually no, she's meant to be with Julian. So she says. So basically, what happens is that Edward finds out that they're both still getting fired into the same woman.
Yeah,
and he says, "Sole survivor, no witness to the crime. I must act fast to cover up. I think that there's still time. He'd seem hopeless and lost with this note. They'll buy into the words that I wrote. This feeling inside me finally found my love. I finally broke free, no longer torn in two. I take my own life before losing you." And so it gets into the idea that actually. Nicholas thought he was free, but actually he didn't quite realize what had really happened because the hypnotist has awakened him before he knows what's really happened. So Victoria then says, "I'm feeling good this Friday afternoon." I ran into Julia and said we'd get together soon. I finally found my love. I finally broke free. He'd kill his brother if he only knew, but he did know. And then Edward says, "Open your eyes, Victoria." So what this reveals is that, in a past life, Nicholas was Victoria, but it also reveals that the hypnotist is the reincarnation of Edward.
Oh, okay.
He says, "Open your eyes."
There we go.
So then they do the one last time bit again, and it's clear that one last time is actually not about them breaking up with each other, it's about them being dead.
Right.
This is all like this doesn't really matter. I just feel like I'm halfway through the page.
We might as well have the full thing.
So then what happens is the narrator sort of says, they've died, and a familiar voice comes through, and we go back from the past to the present, and then the spirit carries on, right? So Nicholas says, "I finally found my life. I'm free. I've learned about my life by living through you." So he's repeating the words from Victoria. So it's not, it's different ideas, the same chorus.
Yep.
And then there's a weird CNN news report, which is apparently about the death of JFK Jr.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I forgot about that bit at the end. Yeah.
So that is apparently what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit weird.
Yeah.
Not quite sure what's going on. So there's this big, long, quite long, heavy, moody outro. It goes on around the 7 to 8 minute mark. And that's actually just a drum solo in disguise.
Okay.
Because the drums are clattering and smashing around and soloing and filling and trilling the whole way near the end. It's quite well hidden, but it's good. But then what happens is Nicholas goes home. And then he puts on a nice little record and pours himself a drink.
Yep.
And then the therapist appears in his house and says, "Open your eyes, Nicholas." And he goes, "Ah!" So the final twist, the hypnotist has followed Nicholas home and killed him, and that the cycle has gone on. And the spirit has carried on, and it's all repeated itself. And then, if you... that static goes straight into the next album and the track The Glass Prison.
Oh, okay. So they actually have a direct follow.
Because there's a meta-album cycle in Dream Theater. There's a continuous stream of albums where each album starts with the same note or sound as the previous album. So Scenes from Memory, the last note from it, gets into 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. The last track of the grand finale to 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, which is like an incredibly long... 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence is nuts.
Yeah.
It gets into the first note of As I Am and Train of Thought. The last note of Train of Thought goes to Root of All Evil and Octavarium. And Octavarium repeats on itself.
Right, okay.
Because Octavarium is like a cyclic album.
Right, okay.
where the last track of Octavarium includes bits from all the previous songs, and it loops back on itself.
Yep.
So Portnoy said basically they dug a hole where they were expected to do it every time, so he ended Octavarium with the same note as the intro, because that completed the cycle. It meant they could stop doing that. So that is the ending of that. Like I like Finally Free. I think it's quite a nice upbeat end to it. It's like it's got a cheesy end credits feel to it.
Yeah.
I think it's a nice finish.
No, absolutely. I thought it was fine. Like, I just felt like it didn't do enough in its 12 minutes, and yeah, that was my main takeaway from that one. It was like it's a fine song. I'm not overtly for or against it. It was just very much a case of like, yeah, I took that in, and it didn't feel like it didn't feel offensive to my ears or anything like that. It was just a case of like, okay, cool, it's Dream Theater. That's what I expect from them. But yeah, I just felt like for 12 minutes, I would have expected a little bit more, musicianship maybe. And there's an awful lot of like just stuff on this one. Unfortunately, like the intro takes forever to get in.
The outro's quite long.
Yeah, the outro's very long.
The real song itself's kind of over about the 7-minute mark, really.
So yeah.
So final thoughts. So you're finally free.
Yeah,
You've made
final
it
thoughts.
Scenes from memory. Seems like we'll be coming back to record another episode. That's personally very reassuring.
Absolutely.
So what's your overall thoughts?
So yeah, it's like I say, it's a strange record to assess as individual songs, because it's not a song record at all. It's an album. You're supposed to listen to it front and back. It tells a story. It has movements and scenes, and it's trying to take you on a journey, right? So I feel, unfortunately, I have done it a bit of a disservice by listening to it this way, by making notes and taking breaks and just sort of, playing it at my own pace instead of the way it wanted to be listened to, essentially, right? So
you didn't go through it. You didn't sit down in a darkened room with your favourite beverage and go front to back through it?
Unfortunately not, no. I had to take some breaks, especially because I think I also did the playlist pretty much in its entirety prior to listening to the album as well. So it was a lot of music in one hit. It was a lot of Dream Theater for one day, unfortunately. But I feel like the additional context has helped me appreciate it a little bit better. I think I'd definitely like to revisit it, but I feel it is an album of maybe like 4 songs I liked, and it's a 12-track record, which shows that like there's quite a lot of it I was also not quite vibing with, but that might have been a case of the context of the way I listened to it, and especially after so much, prior Dream Theater listening to as well. You've given me such a nice broad spectrum of different styles and bits of their career prior. That was a bit like, oh, I would have liked a little bit more of the fat, groovy, like modern production, but I didn't have that with this. I had to sort of settle into its vibe a little bit better, and I think I never quite got comfortable with it. But I would say the best songs on the album by a country mile are Fatal Tragedy. I think Home is fantastic. I think One Last Time is brilliant. And what else did I note? Oh, Strange Deja Vu. Strange Deja Vu also very good. So those are the ones I picked out. What do you think my favourite is?
Home.
And I also think Home is yours.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's the correct pick. Yes,
yeah, that's the correct answer.
Yeah, that is an absolute barn burner of a prog song. Yeah, really, really good stuff.
So my final thoughts before we do further listening. So my final thoughts are: I think the story is a bit crap and it doesn't work because the Bree's singing from different perspectives. It's not clear who's who.
Yeah.
That makes it quite confusing.
Yeah.
But aside from that, this album is fabulous, and pretty much I think at the beginning of the fat and groovy riff to Strange Deja Vu, I was like, oh yeah, I remember why this is one of my favourite albums of all time. And then just before we recorded this, I went to the Cast Iron website and swapped it into my top 3.
There we go.
So it's easily one of my favourite albums. Look, it's definitely hit and miss.
Yeah.
But I think the hits are so big that it gets me through it, and I just love the ambition of it and the fact that they've had a crack and told a story. So for me, it's kind of everything that's good about prog metal, and some of the excesses that definitely rub people off.
Yeah.
I hear you on I think the production's okay. I hear you on the farty keyboards.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's something. I think it's something everyone who likes metal should get into.
Yeah.
Like, you should at least listen to. You should at least give it a crack.
I don't feel like I've come away from this experience thinking, oh, I don't want to listen to any more Dream Theater. Like, I've definitely come away thinking, like, okay, here's a band that there is probably parts of their career that I will absolutely fucking go for. Whereas there's obviously parts in their earlier career where I'm just like, maybe that's not for me. And this is like almost like that bridging point. So yeah, I definitely want to explore a little bit more modern Dream Theater, I think, from here on.
I think my recommendation for you, which is not further listening for everyone else, is probably Train of Thought, because it's definitely their heaviest album, but you will have to deal with some really, really cringeworthy rapping from James LaBrie at times. All right, so top 5 John Petrucci solos. I don't know. It's hard. But here's what I've written down, and here's what I'm going to stick with for the purposes. So number 5 is The Best of Times off Black Clouds and Silver Linings. Okay. Number 4, I would have done more prep and cut these out for you, but these tracks are 10 minutes long. Number 4 is Behind the Veil off their self-titled album. Okay. Number 3 is Lost Not Forgotten off A Dramatic Turn of Events. Number 2 is Stream of Consciousness off Train of Thought, which is the best Dream Theater instrumental track. Specifically, it's about the 3-minute mark, Stream of Consciousness. Number 1 is, of course, Under a Glass Moon from Images and Words, which is very famous for lots of very, very technically fiddly triplet runs. So that's the right answer, and the other 4 are totally subjective. So further listening. So how do you follow up on this? Because I've got a whole, I just went through my entire iTunes library.
Yeah. So the way I did it was I went on to Last.fm and looked at the related artists and saw, I had a look for things that I recognised or stuff I had heard. Because unfortunately, the first 2 that came to mind, I've also previously done as further listening for other episodes. I think even I might have done them for Gojira. I was very much thinking about Between the Buried and Me and Tesseract a lot throughout this record. But I'm like, I've done them. Don't need to check them out again. We've done them. So I've settled with Backwater Park by Opeth, which is a prog metal masterpiece. I think you have to listen to that. as
I think you can tell what I think of that one, because you said I went, oof.
But stylistically quite different to this, unfortunately. It's a lot darker in tone. A lot of a heavier album as well. It doesn't go into the excesses that this has, and it's not as hopeful sounding. So yeah, that was why I was a little bit like, all right, I'll pick it because at least I recognise that band, right?
Look, behind the scenes of Cast Iron, I am really going to struggle on whether we do Still Life or Blackwater Park.
Oh, really? Ooh.
Really going to struggle. We'll probably end up doing Blackwater Park because you've done it further listening. But I love both those albums so much. Okay. That's an excellent recommendation.
Yeah. And then the second one I chose was a Periphery record. I chose Juggernaut, Alpha and Omega, because it has a lot of the similar sort of like leitmotif elements that they bring back into the songs as the album progresses. The album ends with a leitmotif that they start with the start of the previous record. It has a lot of those conceptual ideas that this one is going for as well. It is by far a groovier, down-tuned, genty record in comparison to this. Yeah. So it's not as comparative, but it's definitely a progressive metal record, and I feel like that's why I wanted to bring that one to the table. And I don't think I've recommended Periphery yet on the podcast, and they are one of my favourite bands. So I think I absolutely
very much inspired by Dream Theater.
For sure. In fact, I think John Petrucci did a guest solo on a Periphery song, and I'm trying to remember which.
Yeah, I believe he did.
Yeah,
I believe he did.
So yeah. Okay. But yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to say as well, quickly.
Oh, yeah.
As I was looking on Last.fm, I noticed that I'd listened to a Dream Theater song before. And it was so far beyond what I would have thought I would have checked out. Can you guess by any chance? I know it's a massive discography, right? But it's not a band I particularly like, but it's a cover that Dream Theater did. It's in my Last.fm play.
Cover the Dream Theater did. All right, give me 2 minutes. I can't. Dream Theater do a lot of covers, right? Let me just have a little squiz. Did you listen to their cover of "Funeral for a Friend"? Love Lies Leading by John?
No, it wasn't. I'm afraid.
Okay,
it was their "To Tame a Land" cover from Kerrang's Maiden Heaven tribute album.
Jeez, that's on.
It's on a bonus disc as well for one of the.
It is on. It's on the bonus disc of Black Clouds and Silver Linings.
There we go.
Yeah, which is some really interesting stuff. Like it's got a cover of Lark's Tongues and Aspic and stuff like that. Yeah.
So even though I'm not a big Maiden fan, one of my guilty pleasures is I love cover records. Every time Kerrang compile a covers album, I will buy those magazines because I absolutely adore hearing how bands reinterpret other bands' music, and there have been some fantastic ones as of recent. But I've got that Made in Heaven one, but the Kerrang ones in particular that I absolutely love. And if you've never heard them, they're called High Voltage. There's 2 High Voltage collections, and they're just bands covering other bands, and there's some really crazy stuff on there. There's Bullet for Valentine doing Crazy Train and stuff like that. It's just Fight Star doing Breaking the Law. It's crazy stuff.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
But yes, you're further listening.
Okay, so I have kind of picked three albums and an EP.
So
the first up,
over the
no, I haven't gone over the top because there's a reason why I've picked 3 albums. Okay, so if you want a prog metal album that is a better example of how to do a story in an album, then there's the undisputed king of this, and that is Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime.
Oh, okay.
And the reason, so this is an awesome album if you like kind of that, power metal stuff and classic new wave of British heavy metal. That's this with prog, and Jeff Tate's a phenomenal singer. The reason that Mindcrime story works better is because it's all told from one point of view, and it immediately makes it you actually feel like you're being narrated to. I think it's much more successful in terms of telling a story. You'll get what it's about, without having to go read the liner notes. So that's a good recommendation. All right, so the next one is 2 albums. They're technically 2 albums, but essentially one thing, and that is by Haken, and the albums are Vector and the extremely unfortunately named Virus. Mm-hmm. So Vector was pretty much my favourite album of the year when it came out in 2018.
Okay.
And really great standalone album, really interesting. If you like Dream Theater but think, the keyboards are a bit weird, this is very good keyboards. It's got a really good 80s feel to it.
Right, okay.
And also very quite 80s drums. Mm-hmm. Really interesting sound. So I thought that it was a standalone album.
Oh, okay.
And then in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, they released Virus. Now, they did do a video on YouTube saying, we're really sorry, we know this is a terrible name. This has been planned for a while.
Okay.
And Virus is the companion, the second part of the Vector story.
Okay.
And it somehow goes from being, this is a really good, it went from being, here's my favorite album of the year, to, wow, this is something transcendent now. This is incredible that they've managed to do 2 albums back to back.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense. So it's, I think, in terms of Haken albums, the Mountain is usually there. It's probably one of the best prog metal albums, right up there with Dream Theater's best.
Yep.
But to me, the Vector Virus combo is just phenomenal that they've actually managed to do that in a way where they exist on their own, but they also tell one coherent narrative. It's incredible. All right. The last one, I can't actually pronounce the name of this band.
Okay.
There is a Vietnamese prog metal band, and they're called something like Hack San. That is how it. That's how you would spell it.
Okay.
And they have an EP. It's called Hong Trong Mao or something like that. And it's Vietnamese Dream Theater. It is one song. It is 30 minutes long, and it is absolutely beautiful. It's got amazing melodies, got great vocals, prog metal done perfectly.
Yeah.
It will not matter that you cannot speak Vietnamese. You can. This just blew me away. I think I came across it in the Reddit prog metal forums. But
okay.
Really, really special. And if you look on YouTube for Hack San, type that, and you should be able to find it. There's a live performance of them doing the whole thing. It's really, really good. Really, 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 really impressive. So
cool
it's
stuff.
kind of 3 recommendations, but it's 2.5.
Lovely stuff.
So I think we've reached the end.
We have.
And as always, if you enjoy this episode, there's 2 ways you can support the show. First is to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, but the most important is to share Cast Iron with a friend or two and spread the love around. You can find all the previous episodes on your favourite podcast app or on our website, castironshow.co.uk. Now, there is a caveat to that, which is that some of the podcasts I listen to have said, if you're on Apple Podcasts, you might have issue getting new episodes. I can't remember if we covered this last time, but if you're having trouble getting episodes of Cast Iron, I don't really know how you're listening to this right now, but if you're having trouble getting episodes, try something else like Overcast or many of the other reputable podcast players like Castro or something like that. So if you're having issues with Apple Podcasts, it's on them. It's not on us. I've checked all the RSS. I swear it's not us.
Well, good stuff. But yeah, thank you very much for introducing me to Dream Theater. I'm definitely going to come away from this with an intrigue, and I definitely want to explore their catalogue a little bit further. But yes,
thank you for giving it a good college try.
No,
I mean, we've been doing this for a long time now, but sometimes it's not easy to open yourself up with one of your favourite bands and go, what if Lewis really hates us? I'm going to feel like a dumbass.
No. And look, I've definitely been intrigued by this band for a very, very long time, and I needed someone to at least guide me through it, because God, where do you start when you've got a discography that wide, and there's so many changes in membership, and it's just like, oh God, it's an impenetrable thing. So it's nice to have someone who is a fan to help me to guide me at least. And while
start off with your friend's mixtape, which is published on my Apple Music profile.
Excellent
the subtitle "Pull Me Under, I'm Not Afraid." So if you two are not afraid, you can find that on my Apple Music.
Lovely stuff. But yes, thank you very much for taking me through this. I had a really good time, and I will definitely be exploring Dream Theater further. And as always, thank you very much for listening. We have been Lewis and Alan. This has been Cast Iron. We'll see you next time.
Catch you later. And remember, after we're gone, the spirit carries on.